Hey, it's Dr. Berg again. In this video, we're going to talk about calcium in relationship to other functions. Most people associate calcium with just bone building, but calcium has some very important other functions that you need to know about. The number one function is it's involved in intracellular communication, the signaling of communication between cells. It's a major mineral that helps the cell communicate. There is a condition that occurs when you're deficient in calcium. The body will start to increase the calcium inside your cells. Okay, so normally outside the cell you have 10,000 times more calcium than inside the cell. So we got this perfect network balance of calcium regulation in and outside the cell. Okay, so just a little bit of disruption of that balance can create a lot of side effects. But this condition where you have low calcium, yet high calcium inside the cell, which is very common, is called intracellular hypercalcinosis. Now, don't worry about that name. All it means is there's too much calcium inside that cell. Okay? And that's because there's not enough outside the cell. We'll get into what causes that, but let's take a look at what occurs when that happens. You get hypertension. You get hardening of the arteries. Why? Because all that calcium cannot be mobilized now. It's stuck in the body. And so what do people take when they have high blood pressure? One form of hypertension medication is called calcium channel blockers. What do you think that does? It blocks calcium from going inside the cell. Okay? And it actually helps lower blood pressure. But we got to look at the whole picture here, because this condition can also lead to diabetes because of the relationship between how calcium affects the receptors for insulin. Okay, so it can create diabetes. Cancer. Now, how can that occur? Well, one thing that calcium does is it controls the reproduction of cellular growth. In other words, there's a term called apoptosis, which basically means normal cell death. In your body, if you have too much cells that are growing out of control, that's called cancer. So you have a mechanism in your body that controls the growth of cells and actually causing cells to die in a good way, just to keep them regulated. Well, calcium is involved in that. So if there's a problem with calcium, you can get a situation where it's out of control and the cells are growing, and the cells can get bigger, prostate cancer, tumors, and just regular cancer. And I'm going to share some links down below if you want to get the technical version of this. But inflammation is another symptom in soft tissue calcium. That's in the in the joints. There's arthritis, bursitis, tendinitis, kidney stones, gallstones, plaquing on the arteries in the brain. That's called stroke. So all these things can occur if there's too much calcium inside the cell. Okay, so now that's very interesting, but what causes that? Well, calcium doesn't really move unless it has transport systems. So you have certain vitamins and certain things that help mobilize calcium. Number one, vitamin D. If the person is low in vitamin D, that can create the situation because they're not absorbing the calcium here, and then the body's going to compensate by holding more calcium inside the cell. Low vitamin D levels, right? Interesting. But I always want to know what causes low vitamin D levels, because there's other reasons other than not getting sun. Number one, stress. High levels of cortisol, that's the stress hormone, can keep your vitamin D levels low, which can create this whole chain reaction. So when people say these conditions can be caused by stress, they can, but here's the chain of events that occur. Another thing is low bile, B-I-L-E. That's the digestive juice from your liver that helps you absorb certain fats and fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So if you have a gallbladder issue or a liver issue, or let's say you're a vegetarian, you don't get a lot of saturated fats that help release it, you could be deficient in bile and get right shoulder pain, bloating, digestive problems, constipation. Well, that means that you don't have enough bile, so it's going to be hard to absorb vitamin D, and it's going to be hard to regulate the calcium. See that whole chain reaction? There's another vitamin called vitamin K2. I created a couple of videos on this, but vitamin K2 is very, very important to go with vitamin D3, because vitamin K2, not K1, regulates calcium. It gets rid of soft tissue calcium. It takes the calcium from the cells and it drives it into the bone. It helps make the arteries elastic. It's really good for osteoporosis. It's really good for all these conditions. So vitamin K2. How can you become deficient? Well, if you have a low-fat diet, because guess where you get this? In all the grass-fed fats, animal products. It's in some vegetarians called natto and things if you want to get that. But the point is that low-fat diets and foods low in grass-fed things like grass-fed butter, grass-fed beef. If you're not eating those foods, if you're eating typical grain-fed animal products, you're not going to get K2. So that's a very, very common thing that people have. They're low in these two, and then they get this situation right here. Now, poor diet, low omega-3 fatty acids. Now, that's interesting because back in the 1920s, omega-3 was called vitamin F. Vitamin F is another name for these unsaturated fats, which basically is omega-3. If you're low in vitamin omega-3, you can have a problem with calcium transportation as well. And then low magnesium. You get magnesium from vegetables. If you're not eating vegetables, you might be low in magnesium. Boom, we get this excess calcium. So, a lot of people take magnesium for these conditions right here, but now you understand why it works. This is why it works. Now, if you're taking also the wrong type of calcium carbonate, that's limestone, well, guess what? That can create the situation too because it's not going to be absorbed and it can clog up all your cells. Okay, so you have to be able to understand that that is not the best source of calcium. Just read the label. Make sure it's not calcium carbonate. The other thing is that if your digestive system is bad and you can't absorb minerals, that could be another reason. But if you look at why people take vitamin D, vitamin K2, omega-3, and magnesium, they take those to help decrease inflammation. They take it to improve the immune system. They take it for all these conditions, but what they're really doing is they're helping the regulation of calcium. Okay, so I just want to give you some insights on the importance of calcium and the danger of too much calcium inside the cell. And it has a lot more to do with not just the bone, but intracellular communication.